My name is Kimberly O'Neil. I'm the CEO of Giving Blueprint. Giving Blueprint is the headquarters for Where Cost Studio rests. I am a 30-year veteran in the public and social sectors. I'm the youngest African-American woman to be appointed a city manager in this country. I have worked everywhere up and down the East Coast. My last stop was in Fort Worth, Texas, where I served as the #2 executive for the city court, for the Fort Worth Municipal Court. It was there that I decided that I really wanted to focus on the nonprofit industry. And so 10 years ago, I walked away from my job to launch a training consultancy to support the nonprofit sector. Something about me as well, I've managed budgets in excess of $33 million. So I understand what it's like. $33 million is a lot of money, but when you're talking about $33 million in a grand scheme of a budget, a total budget for an entire city that could be in excess of hundreds of millions, $33 million is really, really small. But my skill set is really in helping to restructure government and nonprofit organizations. I spent a lot of my time and a lot of my various career opportunities going into organizations, looking at what wasn't working well, and then helping them to re-engineer and to restructure to get them to a better place. The one thing that I know for sure is when we plan well, we're able to do well. When we recognize our deficiencies, we're able to put ourselves in a better position to do more the next time. And when we act as if we are too small, not ready, we can operate under the radar. That is when we continue to see these issues manifest on a different level. So it's really important for everybody to understand, although you feel that you weren't prepared today for the things that we're currently experiencing throughout the sector, I want to be honest in saying no one was ready for it. So you're not that different. You just may not have the access to the resources that some of the other organizations do. So for today, we're going to talk about COVID-19 and the impact on the nonprofit community as a whole. We're going to talk about tips to address current organizational needs. We're going to talk about some post-webinar action items that you can do. And then I'm going to immediately go into Q&A. For those of you that have just jumped on, one of the things I want to make sure, chat is for you all. You all can chat amongst yourselves. But where I want you to place your questions is in the Q&A section, because that way I get to see them and I don't have to look throughout all of the chat to kind of identify where the questions are. So as we're going through, because this is a webinar function, as we're going through, I want to make sure that as you have questions, post them in there, and I'll be happy to go back and answer them. I've set aside 90 minutes for this webinar. We will probably not go the 90-minute distance. It's just the default time, just in case I have a number of questions. I don't like to typically get off my calls until I answer all questions possible from everyone. And when I do an hour, sometimes there's just not enough time. So let's go on and get started. So COVID-19 and the impact on the nonprofit community. I don't think any of us, I don't watch television, I don't own a television, but I can't get away from what is happening with COVID-19, again, also known as the coronavirus. But what it's doing within the nonprofit community is catastrophic. A lot of people don't realize the economic impact the nonprofit community has on what's happening. And I always say this, if the nonprofit community was to go away today 100%, we would all be in trouble. We oftentimes don't realize the impact of the work and the impact on the economy that the nonprofit community provides to all of us. And so what's now happening, we've seen, I know some of you, when you signed up, you talked about events that you had to cancel. In some instances, there are events that had to be canceled where you can't even get a refund on the money that you've put down. In some instances, I have a really good friend that runs a foundation in the Washington, D.C. area. They had an event that they had to cancel last week. The food was already paid for. They ended up donating all of the food. So they found something good to do with it, but they're not going to get the money back. So they donated the food to a shelter. They paid all of their vendors because they had to. They paid all of their speakers because they had to. Everyone that was due to get paid still got paid. But what that means is there's a serious deficit in the operational budget for that organization, because number one, they didn't bring in any revenue because they also had to refund tickets. So they are starting out this COVID season in a negative place when it comes to their organization. And the unfortunate part, when we look at an organization that I'm talking about, this organization is really self-sufficient. So if it's catastrophic for them, it's definitely going to be catastrophic for the startup nonprofit organizations that we typically deal with. We have operations where our staff in the startup nonprofit community, we have essential services that can't be stopped. We have HR issues maybe around the place where people they don't have health care provided by the organization because the organization is so small, it can't afford it, nor is it required by the federal government to be covered, but we still are asking these same employees to go out and continue to serve in some capacity when we have a health-related emergency going on, not just in this country, but around the world as well. So this is impact. We're losing money when it comes to fundraisers. We're losing money when it comes to maybe not being able to pay staff. We may have to lay off or fire staff. We also might see that that people are starting to ask for things in return. Maybe we have money in the bank and that money is in restricted funds. For those of you that don't understand the terminology when it comes to restricted and unrestricted funds, when we're talking about the nonprofit organizations, restricted funds means someone is giving you funding and that funding has to be used for a specific purpose. And in a nonprofit community, we really don't like to see restricted funds. We want unrestricted funds that allows us to write the check for the things that are most important to us to keep the operation going versus the restricted funds. So if I have $100,000 sitting in the bank right now, and they say the only thing that I can do are buy presents for kids, but I have to feed children. Well, feeding children and presents for children, if the donor was very specific and it had to be a gift, that means I have $100,000 that I cannot do anything with. And quite honestly, by the end of the year, by the time the holiday seasons or birthday seasons for the children, whatever the reason was why those funds were given, I might not even facilitate that activity because financially we may not be in a position to be able to do that. So we are in some severe, our industry and our sector is in a very, very tight place right now. I mean, we're all dealing with very different things, but I will say this. No matter how tight things are, no matter how small you are in your organization, no matter how long you've been in existence, what money may or may not be in the bank. I want to say to each of you that are on this call, because you're leaders and you were accepted into this class today because of your position, if you are a leader in this organization after this call and you do not plan for emergency, some sort of crisis moving forward, if you are not being responsible enough to ensure that you have a rainy day or reserve fund, that then is on you and your leadership style. Because this incident right now with COVID-19 is showing all of us that we cannot operate mission-driven organizations in the nonprofit sector and not be responsible enough to run them as businesses. Yes, all of the corporations are dealing with something very similar, but we can't say, well, they did it and we can't do it. It is our responsibility to say it happened to us and this can never, ever happen again. All right. So tips to address some of your current organizational needs. So some of the things that we're talking about today, I know a lot of you talked about the fact that money is an issue. Can you all just hit in the chat section? Is money an issue for you all right now? Is there anybody who can tell me that money is not an issue for what they need as it relates to the organization they're running? Is money not an issue? For everyone, how many people had to cancel an actual event or not able to even hold an event because you just don't have the funding, or had to cancel because there's just no opportunity, places are not allowing you to, you've lost money, you've been in some level of a deficit? Is there anyone that's not happening to right now? All right, so one of the things that I want to say is for the tips to address your current organizational needs, the first thing that you have to do is, number one, say, what is the mission of our organization and what is it that we have to do? What is the mission of our organization and what is it that we have to do? And once you list what do you have to do, of those particular items, which ones are needs, which ones are necessities, which ones are essential. Because in a crisis, the one thing that you can't do is continue operating every last aspect of the organization. You have to be diligent in understanding what has to happen from an operational perspective versus what we want to continue happening. In a crisis, it becomes needs over wants, and ensuring that there's business continuity based on what we are obligated to provide. So that's going to be the first thing that you're going to have to do. The first thing you're going to have to do is identify, what do we need to be doing? What is essential to the business continuity? That business continuity can be in your operation. So operations is anything around capacity building. That's the foundation, the hub of the work that you're doing. The second is going to be fundraising. And yes, fundraising can still happen in this season, and we're going to talk about that as well. And then the third thing is programmatically, of the programs and services that your organization provides, what is considered essential. The second thing you're going to do is, based on what's essential for your organization to move forward, who are the key decision makers and the essential employees that need to be aligned with the organization in order for that to happen. The key and essential decision makers within the organization and your key stakeholders outside of the organization that you still need to be in contact with. When you are in a crisis mode, and this is why operating without an emergency response plan is catastrophic, because when something like this happens, you need to be able to pull some document off of a shelf or in a computer to say, this is now how we're going to operate on a day-to-day basis. And you have to know, what are the core needs of the organization? What are the essential things that have to continue? Who are the essential decision makers and key people within the organization? And who are the key stakeholders outside of the organization who can help you to keep things going? The second thing that you're going to have to do, so number one, identifying what the key responsibilities are, the key essential needs. The second thing, who are the people internal and external to the organization who are going to be able to help you get it done. The third thing you're going to do is you're going to follow up and say, what laws, what federal, state, and local laws, and what internal and external policies guide what we have to do. Because in a crisis, you may want to do things a different way, but you have to be sure that you're complying with law and policy first, even in catastrophic conditions like this. I'll give you an example. I am in New York. I split my time between New York and Texas. One of the things that happened in New York, and then that's also happening in Texas, is around the alcohol industry. And there are rules depending upon the state that say how alcohol can be sold, when alcohol can be sold. Can alcohol in a bar be taken outside? And in most places that the answer is no. But the governors, we've been seeing governors lighten up the rules around that to allow bars to still operate, not with people coming into the bar, but for the bar to be able to sell drinks to go. The bars cannot do that without the authorization from the government, even though it might be a great idea to them. Should they have gone forward and implemented that without the release and authorization from the government, they have the potential to lose their licensing and ability to work at all in their business. Right? The other thing that you need to do is identify how much money you have. Right? Look at your bank accounts, look at your financial statements. You have to know in this time, so based on what you said you needed to do, who were the key people that you needed to work with, identifying the laws and policies that are in alignment with what you need to do. The next thing is to look at your finances and say, how much money do I have? And if you don't have money to do everything, now you have to start prioritizing. What can we do and what can't we do? And understand, when I'm saying these things, you don't have 2 and 3 weeks to figure this out. Sometimes what I'm talking about right now has to happen in a matter of hours. right? The only thing that you don't have control over are laws and policies that may need to be changed or requests for any type of modifications or release of that. But everything else you have to do within a matter of hours if we're talking about the continuity of your business and the continuity of providing services to people and things that you're obligated to provide based on the organization. If you don't have any money, you're kind of, your hands are locked, because what that means is you really can't do anything. But then there's still this opportunity for fundraising as well. And fundraising looks very differently in this sphere. One of the ways that you can do fundraising, it's one, look at any special grant funds that may be given, look at corporations that have created emergency funds, look at some of the larger foundations and the family foundations that may be in the process of creating emergency funds. I know in Texas, the United Way has, United Way of Metropolitan Dallas, Community Foundations of Texas, I think the Dallas Foundation as well. But if you look throughout the country, these larger foundations are creating these emergency funds. And one of the things that you could do from a fundraising perspective, because fundraising doesn't mean a fundraiser, right? Fundraising doesn't mean that you have to have a gala or a golf tournament. Fundraising is the process of raising funds to offset the expenses that you need to the money that you need to fund expenses to keep your work going. I know that I've seen that I think Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks, that they have just donated funds, and what they're going to do is cover all of the expenses associated with childcare for healthcare workers, because they don't have a choice in going to work. So looking for things or opportunities, and make that a designation for a particular person. If you are in an organization that has 2 to 3 people, one of the things I'm going to tell you is you do have more than 2 to 3 people, because legally you should have 3 board members. And if the founder is serving as one of those board members, what I do know is you have a minimum of 3 people, and you can also tag and touch any of the key volunteers that have been working. I'll backtrack one more thing and add to this, because this for me is really critical. If you do not have an operating board at this particular point, and you have a nonprofit organization that you have founded and or that you are running, there may be a possibility that you need to rethink whether or not you need to exist. And I can't sugarcoat that. If there are legal requirements to running a nonprofit organization, there are legal requirements. It is not about a feeling or passion or purpose. There are legal responsibilities on the state and the federal level to running and operating a nonprofit organization, because it doesn't belong to us. When you operate a nonprofit organization, or if you founded one, that organization now belongs to the people. And that's how it's funded. It is a public charity. And so if you are struggling with board members and adequate support, and you're an army of one, I would beg that you rethink why you have a nonprofit organization in the first place. Right? Nonprofit organizations provide mission-driven solutions to people, places, and things. It is not good enough to say I have a passion and a heart and someone told me I needed to do this. The goal is to actually provide outcomes and support. And when we've committed to that, we have to make sure that we have the resources to align with that as well. The next thing that I want you all to pay attention to are your insurance policies. Those insurance policies for the organizations need to be pulled out as well. You need to look at what needs to be covered. What are your limits? Are there any deductibles? If you are operating a nonprofit organization today without insurance, and you've hosted fundraisers, activities, events, you are operating out of order. And if something were to happen at any of those events, whoever sits on your board is personally responsible. I want to say that one more time. If you are operating today a nonprofit organization without nonprofit insurance, if something happens within your organization, anyone who is listed as a board member becomes potentially liable, personally liable, as if someone can, meaning someone can sue the organization if the organization does not have insurance. It means that the organization no longer can provide the funds needed for any settlements or any lawsuits. It means that they go directly to the board. So if you are operating today without insurance, I highly recommend, I can't tell you, but I highly recommend that you stop until you can afford insurance, because it is irresponsible, because you are putting yourself, your board members, and every last person that comes to one of your events or that you're served in a very hard place, because there's no financial guidelines, there's no financial structure, there's no protection for anyone associated with the organization. So you want to make sure that you have insurance. But for this, when we're talking about crisis management, you go pull out that insurance policy, you look and reread your insurance policy, you see what's covered, you see what's not covered, and then you also make sure that you're able to provide the support that you needed. I see I have a few things in chat. Can you give us a place for insurance? Absolutely. One of the things, you can go to the Alliance for Nonprofit Insurance. They are based in, and if you add that into the Q&A section, Sharonda, I'll type the link when we get to Q&A. But the Alliance for Nonprofit Insurance in California covers, you're in Texas, and they don't cover every state, but they do cover and provide recommendations. It's a nonprofit insurance company that provides recommendations for brokers within your state. That's where I would definitely go. I cannot stress how important that is. When I hear people say they can't afford insurance, my immediate response is, then you can't afford to run a nonprofit. You cannot operate without insurance. It's like driving a car and you're not financially responsible. If you do that in most states, you're either going to go to jail, or you're going to get a ticket, or you might get both. This is the equivalent. It is that detrimental to not have nonprofit insurance. So you want to go pull out those insurance policies, see what you have, and make sure that you understand what's covered. And you also want to make sure that if your policy is about to end and you need to get ready to renew, you want to make sure that you've also paid attention to renewing your insurance policy during the crisis season as well. When it comes to looking at who your partners are, how do you address your current organizational needs? When it comes to looking at who helps to keep the work going, for those of you that operate with contractors, volunteers, and/or employees, the one thing that you have to do when we're running nonprofits during a crisis season, we tend to put the people that we serve first. You have to also remember to keep your volunteers, your employees, and your contractors first as well, because they're going to be the ones that help you to keep the work going. We have to make sure that their safety is being considered, as especially nowadays. I saw a nonprofit organization post online, and they were very celebratory about it. Their operation can technically cease. It doesn't have to operate. They can close their doors right now. They just choose not to, and that's admirable, and that's fine. But they also don't provide healthcare insurance to their employees. And their employees are going out into the field, each of them, I think, 1 to 2 times a week, to provide food and other necessities to some of their clients. That's great in theory, but you're also now asking and requiring your staff to go out, may or may not be able to practice social distancing, and they don't have health insurance. They are not paid very high salaries either. And so this could potentially put them in a very hard financial situation should they get sick. And I'm going to hope that they don't. But these are the things that you have to kind of consider when you're saying, we're going to keep the doors open. Again, that's admirable, but is it necessary? And if it's not necessary because you've not identified it as essential, don't do it. And if you have identified that it is essential, don't just think about the outcome and serving the people, your program clients. Make sure you're also factoring in the people that help to drive all of this in the first place. If you have any contracts, same thing with your insurance policies. If you have any contracts that that you need to pay attention to, you need to adhere to some language, make sure that you're also rereading your contracts during this season very quickly. If you have access to an attorney to help them to give some guidance, if you've not done that in the past, but you do need to reread and go through your contracts as well to make sure that you understand the terms of your contract. Whatever you can get out of, you need to know what you can get out of. You don't, for many things, and it can work in your favor. It could work against you for those of you that had to cancel events, but it can also work in your favor if they forgot to include something that would technically hold you financially responsible. But if it doesn't hold you financially responsible, I would ask to get out of it if it is not a necessity and I need to hold on to some money. So make sure you're reviewing all of your contracts and your language, and make sure your contracts and your language, and make sure that you're adhering to whatever the language. But if there are one or two or a few things, because it has happened to me and I've been able to get out from under some obligations during some tight times. This has happened to me before, not because of a pandemic on this level, but I ran an organization where we actually lost $1 million. We were guaranteed to get $1 million from the federal government over the course of 3 years. And there was a war happening overseas. This is in the, this was in 2004-2005 season, guaranteed to get $333,000 plus a year over the course of 3 years. That money was going to pay for a lot of our operational and programmatic costs. That was a great thing. We didn't have to worry about fundraising. A war was going on overseas. That $1 million guarantee was pulled back, even though it was guaranteed in an award letter. I always tell people it's not guaranteed till you get the check. And they took that back, and overnight we had to lay off a good majority of our staff. And some of that money we also used to support organizations around the country who followed our business model. And so we also had to pull that back as well. We actually paid for, I think it was 50% of the salaries for executive directors for 3 other non-related nonprofits. So not under our umbrella, just followed our business model. So these things are really can be really catastrophic when you're not expecting them. And I think that was the incident that made me say, we have got to, and I walked into that organization. I was relatively new, but that was the incident that made me realize how important emergency response plans were. It doesn't have to be because of the pandemic. It could be simply because we lost money. As well. I already talked about checking your bank accounts, identify how funds can be used. One of the things that I do recommend, if you do have, this is important, if you do have access to funding, you already have money that's restricted, I would consider contacting every last funder that you have and asking if they would consider releasing your restrictions so that you can use those funds for this unplanned emergency in a way that will directly allow you to keep your operation going. Again, look at those restricted funds that you have. Don't spend without approval, but I would reach out to them immediately and ask them if you can be released from asking from the guidelines originally approved in the award letter. So if you've gotten $100,000 from one of the big family foundations, and it's only can be used for children's gifts, I would email them and say, I have a need to bring in 2 additional contractors. I have a need to be able to pay my staff because we don't have that revenue coming in. We had to cancel, and tell them why. We had to cancel a fundraiser that was pretty much guaranteed to bring in $250,000. Some of your funders will not say no. You just have to make sure you put it in writing and ask them. I would put it in writing in an email to get it done very quickly. I wouldn't even rely on the post office at this particular time, and then pick up the phone and follow up with a phone call once you actually send the request letter into them. But that's really critical for you to do as well. Contact your supporters. Let them know. Supporters can be Your individual donors, the person that gives you $1 a month, the person that gives you $10,000 a year. Contact them all. You don't have to overload them with sob stories, but just be honest in what's happening, and maybe send out, right now we're in an overload. I'm getting an email left and right, like every morning, without exaggeration. I think I'm getting like 10 email from CEOs, and it has nothing to do with what I need to know about their business model. But these are people who have invested in you in some way. At least once a week, once every 10 days, I would probably send out some sort of letter to them, and I would tell them what your needs are. If they can buy things off of Amazon, create that Amazon wish list, send that out to them, tell them, because that means that those items can be sent directly to you. But if you have a need for cash, put that donate link up there and tell them what you need. We need to be able to raise $100,000 over the next month. And these are the things that it will allow us to do in response to what we're seeing for COVID-19. Another important thing for you to do is identify what your issues are. What's not working right now? What are your challenges? Verify that it's an actual issue, not just a feeling, not because someone said it's an issue. Make sure that you're identifying and verifying. And then as the leader of these organizations, make sure that you're resolving them quickly. So that's identify, verify, and then resolve all issues quickly. The one thing, everybody is looking at you as the leader. Everybody that's on this call is considered a leader for their organization. When in catastrophic times like this, you are the person that everyone is going to look to for peace, calm, or to be frantic. Right? And so it's your responsibility to say, I'm going to identify, or someone's going to bring the issues to me. We're going to verify it's an actual issue, and then let's come up with a solution. When you are dealing with a crisis, you have got to be in solution solving mode. You've got to admit when a solution is really not possible. You've got to be honest with the people, but they have to see this process, because you need everyone working around you that you consider essential personnel. You need to ensure that everybody is on the same page. You also need to make sure, I had another point that I wanted to give you. Identify who is going to be the communications liaison for your organization. It might be you, but there has to be an identified person that everyone who's supporting you knows. If we are going to share communication outside of this organization or within the organization, this is the authorized voice for us. And if it does not come from this person, or we've not been notified that that person has been changed and someone else is in charge, then that information is not official and should not be a representation of where we are as an organization. So anyone that's a part, stakeholders, essential personnel, volunteers, or whomever, everyone has to know who the clear voice is that speaks on behalf of the organization, and that when it comes out, it becomes official. You cannot have 4 and 5 people sharing information because it gets confusing. And then when the right person is sharing the information, the message may or may not be received properly. So make sure you've also identified the right person that can share information potentially with the media, can draft communication to send out to your funders to ask for the release, the person that can draft information to send out to your individual donors about Amazon wish lists or your need for cash. Just someone has got to be the key communications person. I know this is a lot to take in, but this is crisis management. This is not just, and this is crisis management on another level. And in order to address it, again, it doesn't matter to me if you've been around 30 years, 35 years, or if you've been around 2 years. As a leader, if you're hearing me share this information with you, it is now, you now know this is your responsibility. And if this pandemic does not put some level of fire under you and your organization to move forward and just do business better, I am going to again recommend, just think twice. It doesn't mean you can't do the work, right, in some other capacity, but think twice about the responsibility associated with running it as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. What you want to do also is on a daily basis internally, so that that internal team, you want to make sure that daily there's some level of a debrief. So maybe it's that 15, if your day is going to start at 9 a.m., maybe there's a 15-minute meeting, call, Zoom, whatever, with your key essential people. And then if you have staff that still need to work, or staff that you've sent home, or volunteers that are considered essential that you sent home, make sure that you're also then immediately that your communications person is communicating or drafting the best way to communicate with everyone else, and that you're getting that information out in a timely basis. I will tell you, for the past week and a half, I have been waiting for leadership in one particular organization that I work with to send information out. And it was not until this week that employees were told that they could work from home. It was not until this week that employees, so this is the first level of communication this week. So we have all of these state of emergencies going on throughout the country. And then we started to see in our area state of emergencies on the city level. But employees in this particular organization were not told until Tuesday of this week that they could work from home. And P.S., their kids are already at home. So now we have employees we're dealing with, and this is something to factor in. When you're talking about asking people to take care of organizations, you've also got to say, what obligations do they have when everything else is shut down? If you have employees that can't come to work and you're requiring them to come to work and they're not essential, what you're doing is probably setting yourself up for when this is all over, you're probably going to lose some employees. So just kind of keep your people that you are serving in line, in the forefront, but also keeping the people that serve on your behalf. Make sure you're paying attention to their needs as well. Right. So real quick, some of the things that I've talked about, make sure you're following law and policy as you're creating your immediate crisis management plan. Make sure that you're debriefing and creating an opportunity to communicate with your essential employees and team, as well as the people that are interested and need to know the information. Make sure that you're identifying who you work with, your partners in this entire thing. It might not just be your organization that facilitates the services and programs. You may have some partners. Make sure that you are all in alignment and understanding what their work limitations may or may not be as well. Look for emergency funds. Remember to look for emergency funds. All of these funds that are popping up, ask. You may not get as much as a larger organization, but if someone gives you $5,000 in this particular time, it is great. It is great. New York has a grant fund that they created a statewide grant fund. And New York City, because that's what I'm more familiar, New York City businesses, to include nonprofit organizations, regardless of your budget, if you are losing money because of COVID-19, employees are out, employees get sick, you're a mom and pop store, you only have 3 employees, there's an opportunity for you to get up to 40% of the money that this is causing you, the additional cost burden. The city is giving grants, so not a loan, but grants back to your organization. So that kind of helps to keep you afloat as well. If you pay rent, if your business is in rent, I'd contact, especially if it's a large company that's your landlord, I would ask them potentially, can you waive my rent for the month of March, possibly April, and put it on the back end? That allows you to keep, even if you're only paying $1,000 a month, that's $1,000 that you can put towards something else. So try to negotiate if you can as well. Review your contracts and languages to see what you can get out of, what you can potentially get modified. The same thing with your insurance. Make sure you have it, and then make sure you understand what's covered and what can't be covered. For those of you that are familiar with South by Southwest, I think this this is the greatest example of this. Look how long South by Southwest has been happening. This is the first year that they've not been able to hold it. They had to cancel it because of the restrictions in Austin. It was the responsible, right, and smart thing to do. But when you think about South by Southwest, people were in an uproar because if you bought a ticket, that you couldn't get a refund. So they get to keep that. But South by Southwest had an insurance policy that covered everything except for things like pandemics and communicable diseases. But there was an opportunity for them to add that on as a rider to their policy. They didn't do it because the insurance companies in the past have allowed companies, if something like this happened and it wasn't as catastrophic as it is now worldwide, they could have added it after the fact. Even after the incident, they could have added it. Every insurance company ceased with the add-on. So now South by Southwest is taking a huge loss. And I think it was last week they announced that they also, in addition to not providing refunds, they laid off a third of their staff. So if this can happen to South by Southwest, it can definitely happen to you. And so let's just be responsible and looking at that. Again, check your bank accounts. And make sure that you are knowledgeable and aware with everything that you have. Make sure you understand restricted versus unrestricted, what you can spend, what you can't spend. And when things are restricted, ask your funders for release of those obligations so that you can use that as immediate cash to help you get over. Focus on your employees. Again, make sure we understand their needs, your volunteers, anybody, but also make sure that they are safe. Make sure that what you're asking them to do keeps them safe. If you need to buy additional PPE is personal protective equipment. If you need to buy PPE, give them gloves. Don't ask them to buy anything. It is our responsibility to make sure that they are taken care of. So just make sure you know about that. Contact your funders and supporters and ask them to donate. Identify, verify, and resolve issues as quickly as you can. You are the leader and you set the tone. So identify, verify, and resolve quickly. And most important, just keep everybody involved. Keep everybody updated and involved so no one feels like they are left out in this process. And I do see some Q&A. So I'm going to stop there on tips to address current organizational needs. Post-webinar action items. Here are the top things I want you all to do when you get off this call today. The first thing, let's look at documentations. Let's look at legal requirements of the work that you have to do. Look at your contracts. Look at your insurance policy and look at your laws and regulations. So that could be local, state, or federal regulations that guide what you're supposed to be doing. Know those three things. Know what's covered in your insurance policy and what's not. Know what laws and regulations govern your ability to do work, and then look at your contracts to see what you're obligated to move forward with. You're not obligated to move forward with, and if not, get out of those agreements if you can, and if it's not catastrophic. It is important that you look and pay attention to documents, because those things right now where people, it's this kumbaya moment where people are really trying to work together. When all of this is said and done and the economy is not where it needs to be, people are going to start collecting on money. And so you want to make sure that you understand what you are obligated to do, you're not obligated to do, and ask for release in writing where you need to. The second thing that I want you to do is look at your bank account. Look at your bank account, look at your financial statements, look at what money you have, and then look at what's considered essential for you to keep moving. And if you don't have the money and you have available in an unrestricted way, but you do have it in a restricted manner, ask for a release. Okay, so the first thing, you're going to look at all policies, laws, you're going to look at your contracts and your insurance policies, and you're going to see what you can and can't do. The second thing that you're going to do is then you're going to definitely look at your bank statements. You're going to look at what you have, what you don't have, and then you're going to ask for a release and leniency in sharing and spending money from people where there have been restrictions on what you were going to do. The third thing that you're going to do is you're going to identify your immediate crisis management team, and everybody is going to have a role. Give everyone a role and make sure those roles are clear, and you're going to keep the lines of communication open. The fourth thing that you're going to do is that you're then going to ask for funding from either emergency funds that have popped up in the wake of COVID-19, and also to your stakeholders. So you can ask for in-kind or cash donations from your supporters, your donors, but look for those emergency funds and ask for them. Your last source is to go after a loan if you're eligible for it. If to the extent possible, do not go after a loan in this season to keep yourself afloat if you are not going to be sure how to pay for that loan after this season is over. Okay, so just be very careful with going into debt and you don't really have money now and you don't know where that money is going to come from in the future. And the next thing you're going to do, the last thing I'm actually going to recommend in terms of immediate next steps, is identify how you're going to communicate. Whoever that communication liaison is going to be, how you're going to communicate and how often. The last thing that I want to add before I go to Q&A, and this is a hard one for those of you that may have 1099 workers. So I'm not calling them employees, but people who are not official employees, but they do operate somewhat in that capacity, or if they're a W-2 employee. You might have to make some decisions to say you're still part of us, but I can't pay you right now. It is going to be a hard decision. And my recommendation is not to do it if you don't need to do it. But there could be an opportunity for you to look at how do we keep the continuity of our services going. And I might have to lay off some people, or I may have to furlough some people. And so I'm not going to recommend that straight off the top, but I do think that you and your crisis management team need to look at all available options for you in this season if we're really talking about creating a healthy organization and making some true leadership decisions. It's not going to be easy, but it can definitely be done. All right, so I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I know I see one question now. Who is that from? Whoever put that question in, can you post it in chat for me? And Sharonda, I'm gonna post, can you post that question from Q&A? Whoever posted it, if you can post that in chat for me. My my Q&A feature is not coming up well, and I don't want to miss the question. So if we can post that question in the chat section, that'd be great. And Sharonda, I'm going to also type in the email address for the insurance company in California. Lines for nonprofit insurance. All right, Sharonda and everyone else, the it's insurancefornonprofits.org. That is there. I also would recommend that you look at, I'm typing this in the chat feature, not in the Q&A feature. I would look up for the crisis management plan template from the CDC. From the Center for Disease Control with the federal government. They actually have a crisis management plan template that's really great for you. It's not something that you can do right now, but I do think it's important. If you're not sure, post this call, where do I get started? Download the CDC's crisis management plan. And if you follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, I'll also tweet these things out as follow-up in there as well. And I'll put these in an email for you all as well before the end of before the end of the day. Are there any questions? I really don't want to miss any questions. I was giving the suggestion that nonprofits can require petty cash, operating cash should check with their institutions. Yes, thank you. So for those of you, Brandon Jones is on the call, and thank you, Brandon, for joining in. He just came in. He works with Comerica. Am I correct, Brandon? You work with Comerica, and I think it's awesome that that someone in the banking industry would even sit on this call, because I think it's important for some of us to know that we're not in this alone, and that someone is really just wants to hear the type of communication and information that's being shared. So I thank you for that, Brandon, as well. And I'm gonna keep this, and I'll add this as a follow-up note and my follow-up communication as well. And I realize I just shared a whole lot of information because I'm a New Yorker and I talk really, really quickly and fast. I am gonna provide a follow-up to this. I'll provide you with a link to the call, at least for the next 7 days, so that you'll have access to the information, because again, I just realized I talked a lot. We've been going for almost an hour now, and I've given you a lot. So I want to make sure that you all have a fair opportunity to hear the information and digest it as well. Are there any other questions? Are there questions that you all don't want to ask in front of other people because I have shared some things that you should not be doing that you could be doing? I'm just going to let you know, when it comes to Cost Studio, I consider us all family. I consider the things that we talk about, the information that's shared, this is for the betterment of our collective community. If you are, I know many of you had a lot of questions that you had, that you were not sure on the direction. If it's that you feel a little hesitant in asking those questions in front of other people, feel free to email hello@Cause Studio, and that you can simply reply to your registration, hello@causestudio.co. If you send me questions by tomorrow evening, so Friday, not tomorrow evening, by Friday, so 2 days from, no, today is Thursday. If you send questions by close of business on Friday, or actually, let's just go to Saturday. If you send me questions at hello@causestudio.co, we'll make sure that we get an answer and a resource to you, So just make sure that you're sending your questions. I don't want anyone to feel, which often happens when I'm dealing with smaller nonprofit organizations, sometimes we're not as comfortable as asking questions in front of other people, and I guarantee you someone else on the call is going through the same thing. So I just want to make sure that the reason I did this was to be of service and to be of help, not to make money. I just want to serve in this capacity, because I don't want to see smaller organizations get lost in this process. So if you have questions and you did not want to ask them in this forum, please email me, and someone or one of my team members, we will be sure to get an answer back to you, even if we have to point you in another direction. And if I don't have any more questions, my goal was to keep this to an hour and only go to the 90 minutes if we needed to. Are there any additional questions, any additional comments or concerns before we get off the call today? And if not, I will get this information to you by the close of business tomorrow. Again, I thank you for your time today. This is something that I just threw together because I wanted to make sure that I was getting information out to the community that I serve. So this was not planned. I typically have a lot more slides and a lot more color and pictures, but for me today, this was not about that. This was really about just getting the information out to you all, to let you know that there is a source and an organization that's out here to serve you all and your specific needs. We don't typically work with the larger organizations. Our heart and our goal is to serve the smaller ones. You're welcome, Sharonda. We just want to make sure that we're here to serve, and that, again, that you all don't get lost in this process. So if there is nothing else, we are now officially at the 1 hour mark. I thank you for your time today. I thank you for your energy in this season. I wish you all the best of of luck. There is a brighter day coming. We will all get through this. It's not easy for any of us. Do not feel like you're alone in this process. Don't feel like you're going to get lost. If you truly feel lost, reach out to Cause Studio. That is why we're here in this crisis management season. For this right here, we are not charging for anything. So if you have a question, ask us. Our goal is to see you all thrive and survive throughout this process. And I thank you for the work that you're doing. And if no one has told you, I'm going to tell you, you are appreciated and you are valued. I don't care how long you've been in operation. If you are here today, you are appreciated, and we thank you for the work that you're doing for our community.